What up friends, Rowlan here. Thank you for joining me in another video. So you asked for it for a long time, and today we're gonna paint a portrait. What up friends, Rowlan here. Thanks again for joining me today. In today's video I want to paint a portrait of an artist I really admire. His name is Rowlan, Tommy, and I just love his music. I will put links in the description box. Some of you may have seen the time-lapse version of it. I just really appreciate his work, and I keep listening to his songs on repeat. So I just felt like I have to paint him as well. So anyway, I just want to show you, I did this, I kind of manipulated the image so that it's easier for me to read the values. I just made it fewer values using the posterize feature on GIMP, I think it's called, or GIMP, I don't know how you call that one. But anyway, I tried to simplify things for me as much as possible because portraits are challenging as is, okay? Again, a lot of people ask for portraits. Let me know what you think in a comment below, and if you want me to continue with this, because I want to focus right now on this kind of thing as well, okay? So it just works well together. So this is it. If you're ready, let's change the angle and get started. Okay, so I have the drawing ready here, and I promise to cover the drawing process as well in a future video. For now, I want to show you the painting process because it's long enough as it is. But you'll notice on the top left corner, you see again the way I edited the photo, just so that it's easier for me to see the values and their variation and how they change. And when I draw it out, I also try to draw these guidelines for myself, okay? I find this is really helpful, and this is something I took straight out of Stan Miller's tutorials, that it just says, you know, pick a subject that you can draw, pick something that you can actually paint, pick something that you can actually paint, because it's really challenging, especially portraits. So sometimes you can manipulate it to look better. So basically I used, as I mentioned, the posterize filter, or something like this, like playing with the colors. It exists on Photoshop and also on GIMP, which is a free software. I did it on GIMP. So yeah, just so you know, you can just use posterize and you decide how many levels of different values there will be. So now I'm starting with the hair, and maybe you caught a glimpse of it in the original reference photo. His hair is red. Now, the colors I'm using for this portrait are not meant to be realistic. I'm not going for realism here. All I'm trying to do is give an interesting expression. So I'm using whatever color that comes to mind. However, and many of you will love this, I am using a limited palette, so only 3 primaries, okay? What you see now, in the beginning, was the Perylene Dark Red, and later on, just now I actually varied it with some Indian Yellow, okay? So I'm using a very limited palette for this, and many of you I know love that, just using 3 primaries, so everything you are going to see here was done using these 3 primaries. There's nothing else involved here, I believe. Maybe some indigo, but I don't think I did. I used indigo. We'll see soon. So now I'm just, the hair is red, and I'm just going as dark as I can. Now, sometimes you can't get the darkness you want on the initial wash, and it really depends on the color as well. And I definitely couldn't get it to be as dark as necessary here. So what I will do is glaze over it in another layer. Okay, many times you can get it as dark as you want, but many times you just can't. Because the color itself isn't dark enough. And even this red, which is relatively dark, it's also Perylene Dark Red, doesn't get dark enough. So anyway, now I'm putting a bit of Cobalt Azure, which is the third color I'll be using here out of the 3 primaries. And this immediately kills the mixture. It makes it more dim and more gray, and this is great. I wanted to turn a bit gray here because we're reaching the shaded area. Okay, some information about the tools I'm using. So I'm using a Saunders Waterford paper. This one is the cold pressed, so you can see some texture. The brush is a Raphael kind of mop brush, but it can come to a tip, so to a point, so it is a good one. My main struggle with this painting was working fast enough on this initial wash so that things don't dry out on me. It was very challenging just to get things to be very even, because right now I'm kind of neglecting the right side because I'm trying to work top to bottom, and it in the meantime it dries out. So what you saw me do earlier, and I'll do it again, is spraying some water with the spritzer or atomizer, just to keep things a little more moist, so that when I come back with another paint and merge the washes, it turns out into one even result. Many times you can simplify things, and that way you can work faster on the initial wash. But the problem, or the thing with a portrait, is that it's not always easy. And there's many approaches to this. Some people prefer to put in large washes and then use wet in wet to get the different values and stuff like that. I am currently exercising here. I'm using the spritzer again. I'm exercising, doing this all in patches. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm actually using a different color and a different value for every location, every point in the painting. So it makes things a little more challenging sometimes, because I don't use large, wide washes. I'm just kind of, doing it as I go along. But that's okay, and I find that if really your focus is just being able to match the value and use colors in an interesting combination, or composition rather, you can occasionally neglect rules of watercolor that says that everything has to blend together and everything has to look nice. It is okay to sometimes neglect these. Like I'm doing here now, I'm just putting in the wash and it touches another almost dry wash. And you kind of color in patches and you don't really care, or paint rather, and I get some harsh criticism from local friends for using the word color, because it's not coloring, it's painting. But anyway, painting in small patches. The one thing that I already just messed up a little bit here is, you see the highlights I left on the left with the yellow area? So I should have blended them in a bit more onto the white. Okay, so it shouldn't be such a harsh line dividing them, and I do that again in a moment. And that's fine, it's not a disaster. But it is something I think I could have done a little better, just maybe working a little faster, maybe even improving my brush technique will help to do this. A great Israeli artist, watercolor artist that I met at his studio, he does this very same way of working, like in patches, and also this is what Stan Miller does. And the result is beautiful, and sometimes you can just kind of not care about washes, drying, because this is the initial wash, remember that as well, so it's not that terrible. We're going to cover it up with much darker darks for the most part. Now what I'm doing is, I decided to just make things a little more interesting, so I'm using green. Now, the only thing left, aside from matching the values, is the color selection here, because the drawing is done. And with the colors, you want to make sure that you're creating an interesting enough composition. I already made life a lot easier by just working with 3 primaries, but now in addition to that, I also want to make sure that I use them in an interesting way. So the basic rule here for me is light comes from the left, so I'm going to use warmer colors, on the left, and darker, sort of cooler colors on the right. And you see me do this here. So I'm using sort of greens and blues and grays on the right, mostly cool, and then I use the yellows and the vibrant reds on the left. Okay. Now on the right, I just left this line, and it's gonna dry up to be a harsh line, which annoys me. I should have blended it in the green on the right. That's my mess up, but whatever, it happens. It's gonna dry much lighter, so it will make it much less of a harsh change. But still, really, wash control is so challenging. Like, look at all the areas right now that I'm, the ear on the right, I'm not touching that now. I'm too busy with the eyes and all of that. So it really is a huge challenge. By the way, a bit more about the guy in the portrait. So this is Rowlan, Thomas. He's an upcoming artist. He's still, I believe, relatively small, but the thing is, his music is fantastic, and I listen to it on repeat a lot. Sorry about that noise. I listen to his music on repeat a lot several of his, an album of his and many of his songs, and I just feel such a strong connection with them. He raps, and it's like, you know, about the whole battle of succeeding and becoming famous and maybe coming out of a harsh environment. And these are all things that really fire me up. And so I just felt like, as an appreciation to him, we did DM, like messaged a bit on Instagram, and he's really engaged with his fans. And so I just decided to paint him and gift this to him, basically. So I'm going to give this to him as a gift. I'm going to send it over to him, and hopefully he will enjoy it. And yeah, just it's really nice to make a piece of art for someone else. It really is different. It helps you become more immersed in the process, because you know it's not just for yourself. It's really for someone else, and you want to make it like as good as you can, the best outcome possible. And so I was highly focused here, really into the process. So now what I want to do is kind of break all the greens and use a bit of red. And hopefully the way you can see my palette helps you better understand what I'm doing. So, and really, because when I'm looking at someone working with the paint in the palette, I can really sense what they're sensing, because it's like a Zen state. I see what they're doing, and I can feel almost what they're doing. And if they make a mistake, I feel like I would have done it differently, just by observation, which is a really cool thing, I think. So anyway, yeah, now I'm varying it, and you see it turns from green to red, which is beautiful because the green is sort of in a shadowy area. Then I'm coming with the red. And notice how all the colors are harmonious. And the reason why is, again, I'm limiting myself to the primaries. And it's the primary colors that I shared with you in a recent video about the happiest combo, which I really enjoy using. So it's, again, the Perylene Dark Red, the Indian Yellow, and the Cobalt Azure. So you can see there's a nice harmony in the colors here, because I am using a very limited palette. I did do another portrait the day after, and I used this very same combination, only I just mixed some different colors. So it was mainly reds and browns and a bit of blues. But in this other piece, I used a bit of indigo to really darken some areas that needed extreme darkening. Okay, so but in this one it's all pure, just those three colors. By the way, sorry about the bit of a background noise. The neighbors turned on the music really loud, and it's not my favorite type of music here, but anyway, so apologies about that. So now I'm working my way around the nose. What I'm doing right now should have merged with the green on the right, and I am now doing it after the green has dried a bit, so the result may not be perfect, but here I remembered to blend the red into the white. Notice how I skipped the eyebrows, because they're going to be significantly darker. Now, when something's darker, you can kind of avoid painting it and then going back to it later on. Now, you don't have to do it. You can paint it in any case, but I use the eyebrows here as a nice trick to sort of balance my workload on the wash. So I use them as a stop point, which is basically near the eyebrows is where I can stop the top part of the wash and like take a break and work my way through the right. As you saw me do the blues and then the greens next to his left eye, which is to our right. So it just let me go around them. That highlight in the middle also helped. Okay, so I did try and you know, break down the wash into smaller areas just to keep myself sane, because it's really hard sometimes to deal with just so many areas together. So now I just did a bit of a time-lapse while mixing, because there's a lot of mixing in this video, like long mixing. Now you get to see another glimpse at the reference here on the left. I will add a link to the picture as well, so that you can see it in its full size and color in any point. I just don't want to embed sometimes the pictures too much into the video. So anyway, yeah, now I'm doing the beard and the mustache, and I will connect it to the lip, because it's a similar value just for starters. And here around these areas that are maybe a bit more accurate, like the lips, the nose, the eyes, if you're going to go dark, you really need to be careful and be accurate. So now I switched to my silver black velvet brush just because it has a better tip. And you see I'm using that to paint the lip, okay? Because if I would use the other one, it's kind of mop, and the tip isn't as good as this one, okay? And I'm, again, merging it onto the rest of the beard. This is really, really important, just to have it go really as smooth and even as possible, okay? When you can merge washes, many times it's preferable. Sometimes you do want a sharp separation, but many times it is preferable. The mix you see is basically the Perylene Dark Red and some yellow and some blue, so it's kind of a dim red. You see it's not a very bright and vibrant red, okay? I'm just working my way around the beard. In between the lips and the beard, there's going to be a bit of a lighter wash. Okay, the beard is relatively dark. So the lighter wash, I'll just add it later on, carefully coloring around the beard, okay? Many times if you don't want washes to mix, if you are afraid of too much bleeding or something like this, because I don't do it simultaneously, not because I'm scared of the bleeding, but because I don't really feel like switching and alternating all the time. But if I were to do it together, I would use that mid value and just avoid touching the beard. And this would make sure it doesn't bleed too much, okay? So sometimes you may not want things to bleed together, and then it's fine to not have the washes connect, okay? I'm saying this because for the longest time I've been a bit paranoid about having washes bleed, about connecting washes. I felt if my painting is fragmented, it's no good. And surprisingly enough, the feedback I got for the more fragmented works was better. So in the end, it doesn't really matter. This is down to technique. What matters is that the values in the drawing are accurate. So as long as these are accurate, even if some of the washes blended where they shouldn't have, or even if there's a harsh separation between two washes, when you take a step back from the painting, the eye does not see all of these things, okay? It's important to understand. All the eye sees is the values in the drawing, and this is it, okay? Yeah. So now I'm trying to slowly go into a pure cobalt azure, so I'm just adding a bit more blue and a bit more blue. And notice how what I added just now is a bit wetter than the previous wash. This can be dangerous if the previous part of the wash already started drying up. So you do want to pay attention and make sure that you're not putting too wet of a wash touching a dry wash, because then it'll just push the colors aside and will create this weird blossom that sometimes is really not that beneficial. So basically now I forgot to put some highlights in the blue area. I don't remember if I try to lift it right now or later on, but it happens, you know. Yeah, I'm trying to lift it now with a piece of paper. It doesn't work as well. What you have to pay attention to, you know, be as free as you possibly can on the first wash, but the one thing you have to pay attention to is the highlights, because again, watercolor, here I'm trying to lift a bit, again, watercolor is light to dark, and so you will, if you lose the highlights, it's kind of gone. You know, you can add white, you can use masking fluid, but I think it's not as graceful as actually leaving the highlight there. So now you see, aside from the eyebrows, I skipped the highlights on the cheeks and on the forehead, and you know, in the eyes, and even on the ear. By the way, there's a highlight in the hair as well. So you have to make sure you're leaving place for those highlights, preserving them properly. And I think that's what I like about watercolor painting, because unlike oils or acrylics where you can just layer stuff, with watercolor you have a very set and a very standard workflow. And this is something I want to touch upon more in the near future, the actual workflow. Because what happens is, you know, a lot of people say that with watercolor you have more options because there can be more effects. There's a bit more interest in the material itself because it's water, it flows, it merges. So a lot of people say that watercolors have a bit more of a versatility to them, and I used to be a proponent of that opinion as well. However, in terms of processes, it is pretty linear in many cases. because you're moving from light to dark. Now, of course, you can make it less linear, or some people start with dark areas and then slowly add the lighter areas. But again, many aspects of the workflow, and this is the point I'm trying to make, many aspects of the workflow are very linear. So due to the medium's properties. It's really interesting. I remember I wanted a while ago to start working in oils as well, but I don't know exactly when that'll happen. I do want to experiment just for the fun, but like actually move into oils. I don't know, not move into oils, but actually do oils as well as watercolor in the same intensity. I don't know when that'll happen. I'm just enjoying watercolor so much right now that that I don't know. And there's this weird thing that, you know, oil paintings have a little more prestige than watercolor, and I kind of want to debunk that. You know, if I can help bring more of the opinion that watercolor is a very prestigious medium, then I'll be happy to do that, just because I enjoy them so much, and it's freaking hard, you know, it's really challenging. So yeah, just fascinating aspects of doing this. I'm starting to feel like I hit the next level. This is something I will talk about in the next blog post. I still feel like I have such a long way to go. However, I do feel like I hit that next step, and part of it is the fact that I really took a break from documenting so much and really showing everything I do, and just took a lot of time to create more peacefully and without the pressure of, oh, I have to share this painting with people, I hope it turns out well, or I have to record the process, which is like a logistical added layer of thinking, and it just, you know, losing energy over that instead of being completely immersed in the creation. And I don't know if it's noticeable. I mean, if you haven't seen my work for a while, maybe you'll notice some improvement. But I can definitely feel it with this one and another one that I hope to share soon, another portrait. So this is something that makes me really happy. I kind of feel like I came from a short time period of heavy immersion in just the creation process, without putting too much pressure on myself. And I feel like this really helped me move forward in my work. So now I'm starting to put in the darkest darks, as you can see here. So we have the eyebrow and just a very heavy and strong shadow under it, reaching all the way to the iris and the eye and everything, just making sure to leave that highlight there. Now you'll notice how this is significantly darker than the green. Okay, now it is true, it is significantly darker, and I will add a mid value to that as well. Okay, so there will probably be another, there's probably going to be another layer that is in between that blue and that green, and of course I will apply it. Well, not of course, but I'll probably apply it once this completely dries, just to make sure there's no big messes or things smearing around or any weird unwanted bleeding here. So now in these areas you want to be really sensitive and a little more patient with your work, because these are some really sensitive areas. You know, the eyebrows and the eyes and the nose and the mouth. These are all like the major parts. They just have a huge influence on what the portrait ends up looking like. What I'm happy with this one is that it really has the similarity to the person, to Rowlan. If I compare it to the portrait I did the day after, I had a much bigger challenge in making it look similar. It looked very accurate, but for some reason, some of the resemblance, it lacked in some of the similarity in the lips especially. Not in this one, in another one. So this was a big challenge. Here I got kind of lucky, because the similarity is there. And even if the drawing is accurate, sometimes you may feel like it's not similar enough, and that can happen because maybe the painting process, you messed something up, or maybe sometimes you haven't accentuated something enough. So anyway, now I'm breaking off from that super dark value and I'm moving into the more mid value for the nose. There's a strong shadow here on the right side of the nose, and it sort of connects to under the eyebrow. I'm trying to again do this and not touch too much of the eyebrow because it may be a little moist yet. So you see, I'm just really putting it in there and letting it go. A bit more on the highlight as well, just to have a more gradual feel to it. And then I'm moving, making my way down the nose, and I will try in a moment, you'll see this, a bit of wet and wet. Now I added a bit of blue just to cool the mixture a bit. It actually turned it a bit green, which I like. All of these transitions are just beautiful. This is one of the things I really love about watercolor, how they blend together. I really wonder what it's like in terms of like oil painting. You have less of this aspect. I mean, I know some people sort of prime their canvas to achieve more of a blurry effect, or have things mix a bit together, but I guess it's just really different. If anyone wants to chime in the comments and just talk a bit more about oil painting, I don't know, could be interesting. So yeah, I actually have, by the way, oh, this is an area where I need to really be careful. But anyway, I actually have a few more plans for some more portraits that I think you will really like. And the reason why I think you'll like it is a secret right now at the moment. But you will get to see this, I think, in the next 2 weeks or so. I think you're gonna love this. It's gonna be interesting, let's say. I think you're gonna love these ideas that I have. It's gonna be highly entertaining, and yeah, I'm trying to also use this opportunity to kind of get more exposure for the channel. So you'll see a lot of interesting things coming in. So anyway, now what you see is I'm doing a bit of wet and wet. I felt like I'll have enough control. The paint is not super wet, and I could just plop in some of the Cobalt Azure into that green mixture, just for the dark shadow on the right side of the nostril and in the nostril itself. And later on I'll come back with a darker color just to get it a little more refined. Now there was again this small dark part under the eye here that I'm trying to, I just light up a bit on it. I mix it with a bit more water just to have it less strong than it was. And now there's sort of this mid value that I'm going to use a lot of blue for. And it's like the green is light, the highlight is the lightest, then there's the green, and then there's this, what I'm putting in right now. Okay, and I will try and blend this as well, not repeat my mistake from earlier. So I'm wetting the brush, and you can't see the water bucket. Okay, I'm using a Magello 3-part water bucket. I think Steve Mitchell in his channel, the Mind of Watercolor, uses that exact one. So anyway, I dipped it in water and I dried it almost completely, and now you saw me sort of moving it around. If you want to blend, you really want to make sure that you clean the brush, you dry it for maybe like 70 or 80% dry, and then you use it to blend. The wetter it is, the more the paint will move when you try to blend it. The drier it is, the more harsh the effect will be. Okay, so now I had this dream that I'll be able to blur that edge. I tried. I'm running this in time lapse now, but it was challenging. When you lose the highlight or lose the the smooth transition, it's just lost like this case. So I didn't try too much, But anyway, yeah. So now I sped things up a bit, and we're moving on to the other eye and eyebrow. Just putting in that dark value there as well. For this one I'm using the green, okay, so I'm really trying to make things a little more interesting by doing that. And you can see how it kind of breaks the pattern of the warm colors on the left, and this is what I was trying to achieve here, just to break that pattern and add suddenly a green. And it really also breaks the symmetry between the eyebrows, so you have the blue on the right and then the green on the left, and this is exactly what I talked about when I said composition of the color. Okay, so not just the value of the color, but also what colors I choose and how I place them in the portrait. So this is really, really interesting, I think. So now moving on with the left eye and the whole eyebrow, my main concern is to again have the washes be fluid as possible. I actually recorded this part already in the narration, and something just my iPhone went crazy and decided to stop the recording and not just disregard it. So I am re-recording this right now, which is a bit annoying. The last time that happened to me was when I was in Paris, and it annoyed the hell out of me back then too. So in any case, I hope it'll work now properly. So what I wanted to say is that moving on with this eye, my main concern is to have the wash be as fluid as possible. Now, this may contradict what I said earlier, that I don't really care about it necessarily, but it doesn't contradict it. The reason why is because in the first wash, I kind of, let it, in the past I would say let it always flow together, but now I said, well, it's too big of a wash, the entire face, it's really challenging, so you can't just have everything always blend together, especially when you avoid highlights and things like this. But now with these smaller washes, it is really possible, and it's something that I do try to achieve. So hopefully you will see this in how I work on these areas. In terms of the small details as well, you want to work slowly in addition to that, because these are all very accurate areas that require accuracy, again, the eyes and stuff like that. So the eyelids also are very important sometimes, and you want to make sure you get them correctly. So now what I did was mix a very light mixture of the Perylene Dark Red, and this will be sort of the mid value between the the beard that is significantly darker and then the white highlight that I left there. Okay, so I just avoided this area so far, mainly because I didn't want it to bleed or blend together too much, the dark color of the beard and the white highlight. So I just kind of left it like that, but now I'm adding it afterwards, and it really goes to show you how you can work in patches and things like this. Now I try to cover some of the highlights because they felt a bit too strong. And also I'm kind of working my way around the shape of the lower lip here because there's a strong highlight on the lower lip. And I will add a few vertical lines to the sides of the lip. You will see this in just a moment on the right side. These vertical lines really help convey the texture of the lip. So you can see them right now. Just trying to get the proper texture and feeling. So if you look at this, if you take a step back and you look at this, it really feels correct to do it that way. Okay, trying to just blend some of it together. I don't think I mentioned this, but I will publish a time-lapse version of this painting, and the reason why is that I actually want to send it to Tommy, to Rowlan, and maybe also if some of his followers will check it out. I want to have a version of this video that's more friendly to people who aren't necessarily painting themselves or don't necessarily want to learn. So I prefer not to send them an hour-long video. I want them to be able to also view this entire process in time-lapse, and I think also it will be fun just in general to see this in time-lapse for you as well. And I'm going to put on the background a song of him as well, so it's going to be fun, probably. So it's just going to be a nice little video for you as well. I try to avoid posting any time-lapse videos right now because when I did 7 videos a week, I think it was a good way to space things out for me, and I think also it is enjoyable sometimes to see, because you know that the day afterwards you're going to have a new video. But now when the videos are more spaced out, I don't want necessarily people to wait as long for just for another video. If they get, Sunday will be a narrated version, then Tuesday will be a time-lapse version. So now I'm making an exception. Okay, I do want to have a time-lapse version of some of these portraits, and I may do so more in the future. So just wanted to let you know the next video will be probably the time-lapse version of this. Now what I did here is I glazed over the hair another layer of the Perylene Dark Red, then I varied it into some yellow and added some blue. I had a bit of a problem with the hair. The thing is, remember how I told you you can't always get the wash to be as dark as you want on the first time, because it depends on the color. So the Perylene Dark Red, it is quite dark, but it wasn't dark enough. It should be much darker than the forehead, and it wasn't before I added this second layer. And the problem was that I knew that if I'll add the Cobalt Azure above the red, what will happen is that it'll dim it, it will kill the vibrancy of it. And I did want to preserve the red color's vibrancy in this particular case. So I did something I don't usually do, and I actually just shaded it using the very same color. I think it can be a bit boring sometimes, but with a painting that has so much variation in it, like this one, it's not really a problem. So I just decided to go for it and do it that way. So you can still see, and I think the red creates a lot of interest here. So I did decide to, after all, just glaze over it with the same color to have a little more vibrancy. And what I'm doing now is just adding the darkest darks to the ear. I'm adding a bit more mass to the back of the head because it felt like it felt like it just ends too soon or ends abruptly. So I just added a bit more of that to the top as well, just where I feel like it's the right thing to do. And the ear right now has mainly two values. So it has the paper white, which is very light, and then it has the black, like almost black Cobalt Azure red combination. I will add a mid value in between, and this again goes to show you how it is okay to work not necessarily always from light to dark, but you can sometimes place in the darks and later on add the lights. It does work. There's definitely more than one way of doing this, the watercolor painting. So yeah, that's a nice little thing here that for me as well, I may try, you know, to apply this to my landscape and cityscape paintings, because I usually really go from light to dark there. But who knows, you know, this may also be a valid way for that too. And by the way, this is why I recommend trying a variety of subjects to draw and paint, because you can learn so many lessons from one to another. So for example, from this portrait, I learned so many things that I can really apply to my landscape paintings and vice versa. Now, what happens when you stick to one subject the whole time? And I do see a lot of people do that. They just kind of paint the exact same thing over and over with minor changes. The problem with that is that it just leads to, I think it stales your growth, you know. You learn the major lessons that the subject can teach you. For example, if you do landscapes, you may learn how to create a really even large wash. You know, if you do fields and the sky and all of that good stuff, but your progress becomes a little stale when it comes to other topics that you may not cover with landscape painting. And this is why I recommend alternating between all of these subjects. By the way, if you look at the bottom of the beard where I just added some red, you will notice the red, and this is something I want to emphasize now. This red is something that I just enjoy doing, this play of cool and warm. So while I'm doing this kind of very blue and cool wash, I just sometimes grab a bit of Perylene Dark Red and just stick it in there, almost out of the pan, like without any water. And this really creates a lot of interest in the shadows, and it makes them richer, I guess. It just adds some richness to them, because you can see all sorts of different colors inside them, and it's just very special, I think. And this is something I just learned and applied from Alvaro Castanet. He does that so much, the whole blue and red play, and it was really important for me to try and incorporate that. So this is another example of learning from many different styles. There's definitely not red. Well, I mean, there could be, but I think in this particular image there wasn't any red in the shadow, but I decided to put it there. You know, I decided to put now green in the shadow of the neck. Now I'm covering some of the highlights that felt a bit too stark compared to... It's too much in the shadow to be this light. But anyway, yeah, just adding that interest to the shadows can go a long way, you know. So this is what I was trying to achieve here. Just add a bit more richness to them. So yeah, so just portraits now I learn again so much because it's so different from what I usually do. And I'll take all of the lessons that I learned from them and then I'll apply them back into landscapes, and it's just a circle that basically never ends. So this is why I enjoy trying a large variety of subjects. It's just like trying a new medium almost. When you try a new medium and you're not used to it, you have this sort of a beginner's luck, and I did talk about this concept in a previous video. You have this beginner's luck because you just get a nice result sometimes, not always, but sometimes, and it's because you went into this with full-on experimentation mode, and this is something that really helps to create cool results. When you can be in full experimentation mode and drop expectations, it just works so well. And a similar phenomenon occurs when you tackle subjects you don't usually tackle. So yeah. Now one of my favorite washes in this painting is what I'm doing right now. So I wanted again to darken a bit of that shadow on the right, and it used to be red there, or kind of a dim red at the top, and then I added a glaze of a pure cobalt azure almost, maybe with a bit of yellow, of the Indian yellow. Now I'm dropping into that very same wash some very darks, just to get that small shadow there. He has a small shadow on the forehead, on the side of the forehead. But anyway, this wash is really one of my favorites because notice how that Cobalt Azure creates a very nice gradation. You will notice that in just a moment with the green under it. So you'll see this, and I did blend it really nicely, I think, at the top. And now I'm going to add yet again another bit of blending or merging, or just blending the edge here. Now it's harsh, so I'm dipping the brush into water. I'm cleaning it on the towel, and I'm drying it also on a toilet paper. And now I'm just going for it. You can see here. Another thing I learned from this painting is that the softer the brush is, the easier it is to blend when the color is still wet. By the way, you can now see the reference again. If the paint on the paper is still wet, it's easier to blend it with a softer brush, and it's better to use a stronger, more kind of synthetic brush with a spring. It's better to use that when the paint is a bit too dry to blend, okay? Because it kind of lifts better. But I find that when I go with an aggressive brush into a wash that's still wet and I want to blend the edges, it's not a good result sometimes. So this is something I didn't know. And this brush I'm using, the Raphael brush, is very soft. So it turned out it's really comfortable for blending stuff. So anyway, yeah. Now I'm adding some of the irises. I don't know how you'd call that, but I just darkened the whole thing up because it felt like it's not dark enough. I will add some more details to the eyes later on. But notice, by the way, notice how dark the value looks right now. Pay attention to that, and in a few moments, in a few minutes, I'll remind you to look back to it and see how light it became again, okay? It really is crazy how much lighter the paint dries. Right now it looks like almost black, but you'll see how later on I will add the pupils. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. I'll add the pupils and you will see the pupils because it's gonna dry up so much lighter. Okay, but now I am getting to the almost darkest darks, okay? So you will see how it gets a much better feeling of three-dimensionality now that I put in those really dark darks. I do try to finish a painting with maybe 2, 3, 4 layers maximum. This is the maximum amount of glazing I can handle. More than that, I feel like the paint becomes a little grainy. I lose the vibrancy of the colors. They just turn a bit too gray and brown. So I'm really trying to end things as early as possible, you know. One of the best, I think, watercolor artists here in Israel, what I noticed from his work is that he many times finishes the portraits in just 2 washes. So he does one wash like what I did here in patches, but he really is able to get the darks to be as dark as he wants, almost as dark as he wants on the first wash. He gets the full gamut, the full value range in one go almost, and then he just puts in the ultra darks in the second layer, and it's just crazy to me. And I'm a big fan of doing it in the fewest moves possible. So kind of like playing golf. But the thing is that it's not necessarily the only right course of action. You can, if what works for you is to glaze and have like 5, 6, 7 layers, and you start really light and then you slowly build it up. If that works for you, perfect. I think everyone should adopt the thing that works best for them. For me, what works is really trying to get it all in the first 1, 2, 3 washes, and that's it. So now I'm adding the very darkest darks on the nose. Again, this will create a very nice sense of depth because finally we get to see a wider range of values. Some of this will need to be blended a bit, so I will use the brush, just wet it, then clean it, dry it, and blend some of that. But you see, some of it is a bit wet. Here I'm blending it. Trying to, at least. I didn't want to fuss over the nose too much because it's a very sensitive area, and I wanted to keep it kind of simple. Just get the values where they should be and not mess with it too much. So yeah. Many times in this painting, I had to kind of stop and think where I want to move to next. It flew. I mean, it flowed. Yeah, flowed. You can say flow, like flow. The flow was really good in terms of me knowing what to do next. But many times I did have to take a moment and just think about it and say, okay, I want to do this next, or I want to work on that area next. And many times you don't even have to stop for things to dry if you sort of divide your work in a smart way. So I told you I'll add a bit of a darker dark on the lip there. It was really important. You will see this in many portraits of the between the lips. There will be a very thin line that's very dark. And generally speaking, also you'll notice how the upper lip is darker. And it's true here as well. You can see this, and especially with men. You want to make sure and be very careful with the bottom lip, because if you paint it too dark, it may look a bit feminine. It just happens, So yeah. Now I'm adding to the ear here as I told you, the mid kind of values. All you had up until now in the ear was the very dark kind of black almost, and the paper white. So now I added that mid-range value. Very important to give it some kind of sense of three-dimensionality. And I kind of blend it in now to have it a bit gradated. Not enough, maybe, but yeah. I think looking back at this part, maybe I could have used a more interesting color for the mid values of the ear. Maybe green, like the cheek, could work really well. But anyway, now I want you to pay attention to his left eye, which is to our right. It's already drier, and you can already see how it's not black like it used to be when I just applied the paint. Okay, so we already noticed this. I told you I'll remind you of that. It definitely has space to put in the pupils, even though earlier it looked like completely black. The eyebrow as well. So you really have to take these things into consideration and really color or paint. A lot of people say, give me that color feedback. I just have to avoid using that word. But anyway, many times you really want to paint darker than it seems. A lot of people I find, especially in the very beginning of working with watercolor, are afraid to go too dark, when in fact it's so much more common to go too light. In many beginners' paintings, I see that it's just not dark enough. And here's the perfect example. The white of the eyes isn't really white. You see there's a strong shadow there that I just added. I added it using a bit of green.
sort of an olive dirty green. So this is another example of that. Okay, now one major thing that's missing to me right now is a separation between the beard and the neck. So I will add that in just a moment, but now I'm adding the pupil as I said, and you can see how you can see the pupil now that I put it in. So you keep layering and making it darker and darker, but you are still going to be surprised many times at how much darker it is not. You know, how much you thought it was dark when you put it in there, and now it's like really light. You know, like this shadow I'm putting in right now, I put it earlier wet in wet and it just disappeared, you know, because it wasn't dark enough. So this is, by the way, this is something for me to learn from, because I do see artists that are able to get this in one go. It's a little harder, but it is possible. I'm not really pleased with the shadow that I just put above the eyebrow, so I'm kind of just muting it a bit, you know, making it really soft and barely visible. I don't think it's necessary as much. So anyway, yeah, now things have dried up a bit. So I'm adding a bit of Cobalt Azure, a bit of the Perylene Dark Red now to the mixture. I basically want to create a dark enough mixture that matches the beard. And I'm just going to create a separation in the bottom of the beard and the neck. Okay, this is important. Because it didn't feel like there is a separation there, and you can see in the reference that there should be. And I'm using this opportunity to stretch that dark patch I'm adding onto the left side of the beard as well, because some areas there should be a little darker. Also, one thing I noticed is that I didn't shape the head as correctly as I could in terms of the beard line on the right. On the left it works really well, but on the right not so much, and so I used this opportunity to fix that. The problem was that the jawline was a bit too round, and here you can see me adding a bit more of an edge to it, just to make it a little wider and more angular. Okay, it was a bit more angular in the reference, and these are things that are sometimes very challenging to get accurately in the drawing process itself, not painting wise. But yeah, so now I'm adding some more dark patches to the left side of the beard. This is done to create some interest and because there are some darker areas there. I barely touched that left area of the beard since I started this painting, and now it felt like it needed some touching up. Sometimes as you darken the painting, areas will suddenly pop that aren't dark enough. Okay, so this is exactly what happened here. I darkened the beard and the hair and the ear and the eyes, and then the beard, the left part of the beard, felt like it needed me to attend to it. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Even if you're doing pencil or pen sketches, you probably notice this. Once you darken an area up, another area that seemed dark up until this point now looks very light. So now I'm basically mixing a very, very dark mixture for the shirt. I started with just the Cobalt Azure and the Perylene Dark Red, and it wasn't dark enough. So I added some indigo in. This is the only part of the painting that doesn't make use of just the three primaries. Okay, everything you saw so far is just the Perylene Dark Red, Indian Yellow, and Cobalt Azure, but now I just had to add a bit of indigo to darken that up. Mainly because I wanted to get it as dark as possible on that first wash. Okay, with the shirt I don't want to fuss around with it and add a wash, wait for it to dry, add another one. I felt like I want to get it in spontaneously, and so just in one go, and so I felt the need to darken it as much as possible. I also switched to my flat emeralds. Let me get it for a moment just to tell you the name. Museum Emerald brush, which I used for quite a few portraits now, so I'm happy to say I found a better use for it, and it didn't do me so good in the landscape paintings, but also in the abstract painting process you saw me using it, so I did find some good uses for it now, so I'm really pleased with it actually. It's funny how when I just become better, some materials that I maybe didn't like in the past are just connecting for me better now. Now with the shirt I kind of decided to finish it off with these kind of strong angular lines at the bottom and not fill everything up. It was a decision I made on the spot. Because I wanted it to just kind of blend into the white, okay? So this is why I decided to go at it this way. And what I'll do in just a moment is mix an even darker mixture, or maybe a more a purer color mixture, and put in the shadows of the shirt wet in wet. The reason I put them wet in wet, you could do it after the first wash of the shirt dries. The reason I decided to do it wet in wet, and you will be able to see this in just a moment. Now I'm just fixing that line there. The reason I decided to do it wet in wet is because I wanted it to blend into what I already put, and not have too sharp contrasts, so that it doesn't compete with the face. Okay, so you see right now I'm putting in that, I'm trying to slow down my speech because I speak really fast. So right now I'm putting in a darker mixture into a bit of a wet area, and you can see how the edges are really soft. And this is exactly the effect I'm looking for. I don't want the edges to be too harsh, because then they'll end up maybe competing just a bit with the face itself. Okay, now you could argue that the way I abruptly finished the shirt also competes with the face. I think it's kind of okay. And it doesn't really matter this much because there aren't a lot of details there. It's all very dark, so you know, you can definitely get away with this. And now we're really close to finish, so I'm just gonna sign this one. I decided to sign it with my full name, so I think this is the way I'm gonna sign all of my works from this moment onwards. Just the entirely Ron Jankowski, very complex name, but hopefully it will be a little more well known in the future. Now, one thing I did want to add is stronger pupils. So this is the one thing I'm adding, and it's the final touch almost. I did add a bit of a shadow in the bottom part of the hair later on off camera. So you won't get to see this here, but it wasn't that significant of a change. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of what the final painting looked like. So yeah, and you can see here how the pupils make a significant difference, because it felt to me like the pupils were just super dilated when you weren't able to see them, and now I put them in so you can actually see what they look like. And yeah, this is done. Let me show you again the final result, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. So friends, I hope you enjoyed this full painting process. Let me show you again the final result. This one is larger than the size I usually work at, as you can probably tell. I'm really pleased with the result. I just wanted again to show you, so I used this as a reference as well. I kind of manipulated the image to have few less values so that it's easier to read for me. And this is again the result, so this really helps. It's just a good idea for something to do that will help you simplify things. So I hope you enjoyed this. I plan on making a lot more portraits, and I know a lot of people again wanted to see this, so don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube. I will try and make this sort of a series or a playlist dedicated to portraits specifically. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Snapchat, where I share updates on these kinds of work in progress and some personal stuff and even views from my city. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this once again, and I will see you really soon.